There we go. People are coming in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. You can see people are coming in. That's great. Just a reminder as people come in, this roundtable is a follow-up to our cover story on Port Alberni, which has been a really popular story and hopefully shines a new light on the city's innovation economy and the changes that are happening there. I'm Carla Sorrell, editor of Douglas Magazine, and I'm here to host today's roundtable conversation. I would like to acknowledge that Page One Publishing is located on the traditional territories of the WSÁNEĆ and the Lekwungen speaking people. We are grateful to live, work, play, learn, and talk in this space. And I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who's joining us today and to today's panelists. These stories about the growing momentum and economic development in our regional economies in Vancouver Island have been incredibly popular stories for Douglas. And some of last year, our Campbell River feature was one of our most highest performing features over the year. So I just wanted to remind everyone that speaks so highly to where people's interests are and where our focus on development, on economic development, social development on the island lie. And it really excited me to get those numbers and hear that that's something that our readers and our viewers want to hear and want more of. So we are bringing you more of it. I'm happy about that. I'd like to start by letting everyone introduce themselves. I just wanted to say, I was just saying to the panelists, this was a really nice story for me. I have huge trust in our writer, Andrew Finley. He has been a pleasure to work with. He always brings great ideas to the table. He is an incredible listener and he really enjoys his work. And I think he's an incredible storyteller as well. With any story that we do, any feature we do, it's the starting point of a conversation. It's frustrating for me because we can never tell the whole story, but we frame a story for each issue. And then for me, there's always more that comes out of it. And with this feature, I've been really lucky to have people call, follow up, and we're really, really lucky to have been able to put this conversation together so we can open up the conversation that much more. And I was just saying to the panelists, Port Alberni is a special place for me personally. My mom was born there. My grandparents lived there for 10 years, and my grandpa taught at high school. So, anyways, it's a place that's always got a little piece of my heart. I'll go around and ask the four panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can get started. Sharie, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Sharie Minions. I am so proud to be the mayor for the city of Port Alberni for the last 3-ish years, and really happy today to be joining from the unceded territories of the Tseshaht and Hupacasath First Nations. Thank you for having me today.
Bill?
Hi, I'm Bill Collins. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. And I look around at my esteemed panelists and I'm honored to be here. I'm sitting in Sydney in the WSÁNEĆ People's Territory, but our business operates up and down Vancouver Island, and I'm very honored and proud to call partners from the Klahoose Nation to the Tseshaht, Nuu-chah-nulth, and Hawaiian First Nations to the Ahtsik First Nation. And I have to say thank you to all our partners for allowing me to be here today.
Wonderful. Gordon.
Good afternoon. My name is Tseshaht. My traditional name, my English name is Gordon Dick. I'm a Tseshaht member of our community here in the Valley. I've been a career artist for going on 27 years now, and owner and operator of Ahtsik Native Art Gallery in the Valley here. So thank you for asking me to participate today.
Thank you. And last but not least, Reana.
Reana Miller, soon to be Community Development Officer in the Community Futures Office here in Port Alberni. And I'm grateful for this opportunity and happy to be sharing our community with a wider audience.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I kind of, there was a lot of news to me when I got this feature in, and certainly the incredible jump in house prices in the last year is something we always are interested in from an economic development perspective, and something that is not isolated to Port Alberni, something that all of the municipalities and cities are thinking about. But what I felt really came across in the article was that Andrew did such a good job of capturing was the draw of the lifestyle and the efforts that the community are making to ensure that Port Alberni's growth is joined up and reflects the city that you want it to be. I was wondering if each of you could speak a little bit to, how you, in your own ways, or as part of the community, are fostering that growth, and what values are at play. Should I choose people to go?
I'm being too polite.
Depends on where you want to start.
Should we start with the mayor?
Thank you. First, I just want to say, obviously, thank you to Douglas Magazine, but thank you to Andrew for just taking the time to capture so well the community in such a real way, because we are, a community that is making a big transition. But I think what he really did a fantastic job of is not hiding the challenges that have previously existed and that still exist in the community today, because those are a piece of who we are as a community as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting time to be in this role, with a fantastic council standing with me and fantastic partners across the board in Port Alberni. And I do really feel like it is a kind of a transformational time in our community's history, and we're excited about the future that we're building. And when I think of what we're doing to foster growth, I think that a lot of the steps we're taking today are really intentional. Because we have the opportunity to be intentional. We're intentionally, shifting away from focus on, maybe one large company coming in and saving the community as we have in the past. It's been kind of a mantra in Port Alberni, we need, because that's what we knew as success in the 50s and 60s. And we're shifting more intentionally to how do we support small innovators, small entrepreneurs, small businesses to be successful and build their roots in this community. And through that, we're really getting people who are invested in our community and who, appreciate and feel that support and want to invest further and build their lives here. And I love every day hearing the stories of why people are choosing our community. I'm hearing about people moving here for lifestyle. Affordability is always a factor, although I keep saying we are not going to be the affordable spot on Vancouver Island for long, but not people choosing to move here because it's affordable as their sole factor, moving here because they love what the community represents. They love the culture that exists and the lifestyle that is being created and the shift that they can feel and they feel like they get to be a part of. So it's a really exciting time, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists. It's there's an energy in the community right now that is just amazing.
Well, it really comes across that, and I think we get the sense in the article about fostering opportunities for small businesses and that network that is developing and important between people. Reana, do you have, is that kind of something you're engaged in with Community Futures?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually talking to my colleagues about, what's the picture of people coming into our office? And we have a large volume of people looking to, we're in a pandemic and they're looking to start their businesses. And I think that says a lot. And the businesses that we do have been surviving this pandemic, and many of them have been doing very well. So it's showing that our community is supporting that and cares about the survival and how our businesses can thrive and do well and continue to do more for our community.
Well,
I'm thinking that, oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Go on.
Oh, just thinking about the lifestyle aspect as well, right? That we're looking at, yes, you can have a job and live wherever you want. What makes Port Alberni special, right? Our community, I feel, is at a point where we're very eager to share, and we're very excited to share. And when we are receiving this kind of attention, it makes us feel good about ourselves, right? That it's almost finally like what we know is now becoming known by others. What we've been living and we have understood for years is now being understood by others.
That's great. Gordon, do you have anything you could add about I mean, you've kind of seen the community grow. You've got your business set up there.
Yeah.
You know, what do you see in people working together and supporting other businesses and that kind of growth of opportunity?
Well, what I've witnessed over the past few years is people moving and coming and just seeing what the valley has, and they're stopping in the gallery, introducing themselves and introducing their families. You know, I just talked to a couple just 2 weeks ago that they just moved in from Vancouver, and you know, one was able to move with her, get a job here, and her husband, his job is home based, so he's able to still do it. And they loved, to share what Reana is touching on there is they're just amazed on how many trails and lakes, and with the lakes, and how many rivers and streams that we have, and for that part of the lifestyle, which I'm always very appreciative and thankful for. It's I always say we're always very busy, myself included, but it's always great to just, not be around any electronics and go in the trails, and in the rain, sunshine. It's pretty fortunate place to reside.
Absolutely. I think it's great. You mentioned technology, but what's come with this massive increase in technology is a bigger desire for places where the connection and the kind of release in nature is that you've just described is available on a day-to-day basis. So you obviously you're well situated already. Bill, you've tell us a little bit about your relationship with Port Alberni. When you first kind of visited and realized there would be opportunity for Cascadia.
Yeah, it was more than half a dozen years ago. I sat around a boardroom table with Pat from the city and Dave, who's now with the Tseshaht tribe government, and of course Zoran at the Port Authority. And we were gathered under the auspices of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance to look at ways to drive business from the globe into communities across the island. And the trio sat around the table and said, "You must come to Port Alberni." And it was a very friendly tone, because we're sitting there with the airport authority in Nanaimo and some other places out of Campbell River, and the conversation drew me to talk about specifically Port Alberni because of the nature of I wouldn't call it aggression, but really subtle prompting to go to this great spot. And as a result of those conversations, as an entrepreneur, we look to go to places and build businesses where we're most welcome. And what's important that has come out of that conversation, I think was reflected in your article, was you cannot be a faceless, nameless corporation. And what I enjoyed most about the article was looking at the faces of the people, because I've visited most of the businesses over the half a dozen years I've been back and forth to Port Alberni. You see faces, you see people, and that's what comes forward. And any business will thrive in that context of people and personal to person relationships, and government to government relationships. And I think that is exemplified beautifully in Port Alberni, and that's what attracted me and my entrepreneurial spirit to the Alberni Valley.
Well, that's wonderful, and couldn't speak higher for a reason to work in Port Alberni. I would like to. I felt like there's this building of the innovation economy, and that certainly is something we're seeing in a lot of economies looking for ways to support innovation, development, growth. How Sharie, how are you fostering that aspect of the economy's future?
Yeah, I think that, creating that kind of ecosystem of innovation where you're not that one business, working on something on your own, but you have supports around you is an amazing way to grow that, innovation mindset in your community. So we've seen success in, brick and mortar. We turned an old fish processing plant into a quite new age food hub processing facility, and Cascadia is an anchor tenant there, where we're seeing a lot of innovation in the types of products and types of processing styles through businesses working together. So I think that's a piece of it. And then I think as well, just celebrating what we do have here in the community. And we see, examples of like Coulson Aviation converting, old planes into world-class water bombers and fighting fires all over the world, down to, we see other than that, Coulson Ice Blast, for example. We see Sand Group just doing some amazing innovation, bringing an industry that, in the forest industry, really into the future, and kind of like living those values of using every last bit of what you take out of the forest, turning it into a high value product. And I think when you build up that kind of critical mass of companies who are working with that mindset, innovating and learning and advancing and trying to do better and better and better with everything that they do and every product that they put out, it just naturally grows. And Cascadia is another just amazing example of that in the community.
Well, it's so interesting because you're talking about some big companies and some of them who have had a stake in Port Alberni's success for many years, and we can see the economy is shifting. But to hear that innovation is happening at all levels, the large scale companies who are pretty steeped in traditional ways, and you probably see more than any of us what that level of innovation looks like in those companies. And then we've got, you've obviously fostering a really good balance of innovation and collaboration on a smaller scale. And I wonder, Reana, if you could kind of speak to that innovation and collaboration with on the smaller scale level in the community.
Yeah, I'm thinking it comes back to that word ecosystem. Like my notes on this, pre-talk were about the environment that we're creating right now. That's not just one thing, it's a number of things all kind of reaching that interesting point where they feed off of each other and create something new, and like the growth accelerates. So with small businesses, like what I'm seeing is that people are thinking bigger, right? People are trying new things, are making changes, are inspiring each other, or making new collaborations in the small business level. And I think that's really interesting because maybe these weren't risks that would have been taken before, but the climate is right for it now. And if they want to push forward, then we do have supports in place to help people with that, to move their business to a different area. And I've also seen that the businesses are doing, I think, an amazing job at changing and responding to this environment that we face ourselves in right now. Right, that they're looking at new ways of keeping themselves moving forward and embracing new technology and really trying. And I think it's working out for them.
Do you think there's always been a pretty collaborative kind of spirit in Port Alberni, or is that something that people want more now, given maybe the state of the world, or just the growth and a point of growth?
Maybe a little bit of both. I feel like that we're a small community. People do know each other, and there is good connection that way. The business community is relatively small, and people go. What I've seen is people go above and beyond to help each other, to cross promote, to give back. Proceeds of whatever they're doing. To a community fundraiser or something like that. Or just putting in the time, right? That time is so valuable when you're an entrepreneur. Like that is literally time is money, and it's a gift to be giving. So I think that climate has always been there. What I'm hearing a bit more of is that people want to continue doing these things. Like they want to make more connections. People have, in my experience, that like the feedback is that we don't want to duplicate things. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to strengthen what we have, and we want to focus a bit more.
That's great. Gordon, I was wondering how, you've run your own business. You're an artist in your own right and have a gallery. How was that setting those up and creating momentum for those and finding success in those two strands of your business? how was it at the beginning, and how is it now in terms of community support, building and maintaining a business, growing reputation, and where you might have intersected with different parts of the community?
Well, I would say, especially opening the gallery was was obviously a large learning curve. The more readily available to the just general public, and then where I'm located is right along the Tseshaht and the Island Highway, Pacific Rim Highway, which is heading out to Plulit and Tofino. There are many talented artists in the valley, First Nations and non-First Nations, that that are high caliber artists. And my hope and my energy is towards having whether it's First Nations or non, that just to have more public art, because I've been fortunate enough to go to Europe a few times, and what I noticed very much was how much public art for centuries really in Europe has been from you could see a 200-300-year-old piece or something that was made 3 months ago, and that's still it's a career. It's looked at as a legitimate career, whereas the US and Canada are still needing to view it as that, in my experiences. So just I think more, I always say we can't have too many artists in the world. So that's but to have the shifts that need for growing, because you have to adapt, just like everyone is doing here today, and the way the world is right now, and looking local, you do see that and feel more of that, and then we anticipate more of that now too. And then it's just trying to introduce that and share that's a possibility right here in the valley, right here on the island. So yeah, and we're just to inform and educate individuals on how rich and diverse our culture is, even just for the island, or even just in the valley here. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've really stayed your path, and it's been a worthwhile journey for you bringing arts to the table. I'm a huge supporter in the role art plays in communities, kind of everything it gives to people, and I've also seen the difference between Europe and North America. I think, Sharie, if it's okay, we talked about this a little earlier, and you said there's a lot of potential for Port Alberni in this, in moving forward in the arts, and I wonder if the three of you could speak to that. What's next? What role could art play in this next phase of Port Alberni's growth and development?
Yeah,
thank you. Want to?
Sure.
Thanks, Sharie.
Yeah, I actually think back to Reana. I think it was the first time that I met you, and definitely the first time, Gordon, that I met you at a meeting in my office where we talked about a public art piece, and Reana, you shared your kind of vision of what public art should look like in a community, and I often think back to that. As we've made a lot of changes in our community and we've progressed a lot, I think one area where we haven't quite gotten there yet is that role of public art. So I think that we've got more work to do, but the right people in the right places, and the right kind of consistency with to try to highlight that value. But a lot of opportunity as well. And if we speak specifically to Indigenous art, the community is building the Key to Key pathway, and we've been talking with both Tseshaht and Hupacasath about how we can highlight use that path as a place to highlight Indigenous culture, whether that be with art pieces or other opportunities, as we begin to redevelop the Somas Mill site and that really critical piece of waterfront. We've been having conversations about how do we take some of that, the old industrial buildings that exist there that, are a bit of an eyesore now, and turn those into a way to really celebrate through public art what used to be there. And then going back further than that, that site is adjacent to a really critical Indigenous village. So, how do we take that and use that and use art to celebrate that history? So a lot of work to do, but it's an exciting point with all of the projects we have in front of us to really start to turn a corner and use public art to celebrate our community, past and future.
Wonderful.
I think it goes a little beyond just the public art, Sharie. If I think of a UFT prof more than a dozen years ago talked about artists being the new engineers, because we have to bring innovative solutions to the fore, and everybody should participate in that innovation. I noticed last Friday a couple of key events that happened in terms of innovation. As an industry, a very young industry, we continue to push for all parties to innovate. Quite often, governments will look to industries as the source of innovation. But in fact, it's going to take everybody innovating. And I noticed the new Ministry of Lands, Water and Resource Stewardship with the new minister, a local West Coast Vancouver Island MLA. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's government on record as saying we want to innovate. And I noticed at the same time, in fact, with competing for press coverage on Friday, was an announcement here in Sydney by the Tseshaht First Nation and the first enactment of their new marine use law, which really asserts their rights to control over the resources and more control on their destiny. To serve their members. The same is true of the nations in and around the Alberni Valley and Port Alberni Inlet, because there's innovation happening all over in those communities. And if we all get together on the innovation, I think we have a lot to say and a lot to do, and it's all levels. So I'm really happy to be part of that innovative scheme, and a lot of it's being driven from Alberni.
That's wonderful. Reana or Gordon, do you have anything to add kind of to that line of conversation?
I'm gonna go ahead. Was that a nod to me?
Subtle.
Yeah, right. I'm thinking that it's not necessarily artists, are the ones that only have the sole control over create or innovation. Like it's creativity is what I think of, right? Creative ideas, creative solutions, and artists are a great starting point. But what I think is important is that we're looking at this from not just an artist perspective, that we're being creative in more avenues as well. I mean, I would absolutely love to see more incorporation of public art. That's something that seems to come up quite a bit, and a lot more recently. And I'm seeing a lot of really positive movement that way, right? We're engaging professional artists to do large scale visible pieces in our community, and I think they're being accepted very well. Like people are excited about them, and they're getting good attention, and it's something that we now point to and say, well, look at this. This is us. This is who we are. And it does it's a huge benefit for our community to have this and to engage artists.
Yeah, the Story Tower is a great example of that. Just such an important piece for our community and an opportunity. I mean, a professional artist was engaged there and valued, rather than, I think there also tends to be this, if art's going to be provided, let's ask for it to be provided for free mentality. And that situation was handled differently. And once that, I'm pointing down at the Harbor Quay right now, but once that, the big white cover comes off of what formerly was the clock tower and will now be the Story Tower, highlighting the story of the Tseshaht Wolf Village, I think that it's going to be an incredible piece for our community to value and to learn from, and for visitors to come and see, and just a really great example.
Wonderful, thanks. Gordon, anything from you?
Oh, I'm very excited for that that important piece of our history to be shared and informed for the public, because so many locally, like even locally, are unfamiliar with how rich our culture is, and and then people visiting from abroad. It's important to when I've gone to travel other places, I want to know the history, and I'm keen on that. So I try and absorb and appreciate that. So it's good to see that that's going to come to fruition with that big project. I know there's been challenges, and it's great to see that it's still pushing forward. It's a great plus to the community.
Well, it's interesting that the conversation's kind of, bringing it to that storytelling element, and what the community, what kinds of activations and projects can teach people that come to the community and live in it, because we all, fall short of knowing the history of the places that we live in, and that arts and culture can play a really important role in that. You've mentioned some really incredible collaborations with the city or with kind of industry and First Nations, especially around art. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit, all of you, about those elements of collaboration for the future. Certainly, Bill, you mentioned different nations you work with. The Clock Tower is a good example of bringing an artistic viewpoint to the forefront of the city. And I think that's something that came across in the article too, is that the real efforts being made towards reconciliation through collaborative projects.
Yeah, I was taken by, again, the nature of the way folks interact in the Alberni Valley in particular, where you never step too far from home in your thinking. You always have to bring back to the local context. You may be talking globally, but as the phrase goes, you need to act locally and ensure those conversations are had in an open and safe way. And so for us at Cascadia, it's about looking towards the future, and it's about taking the strengths, and that's strengths of our ocean, strengths of our people on the land, and the links between them, and leveraging those strengths to take ideas and creativity and innovation to the world. So when we talk about collaboration, we have to spend time in a place. When we first sat down as principals at Cascadia, across the table from Chief Charlie Coots, he was very gracious, and the whole team there was very gracious in inviting us in with their partners in aquaculture business and fisheries business, Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, and Larry Johnson, again another Alberni fellow. We have an opportunity, but it comes from conversations, and it comes from developing a nature of trust, so that we're all trusting we're heading down the same path, and we're aligned in our values, and we're aligned with what we want to see as an end result. So for Cascadia and other businesses, as illustrated in your article, it's about taking that strength in a sense of community and bringing that to the world. And I think if we do that correctly, the world will come to our table to sit down across the table from us and share a meal or share a brew from the local breweries that are there, and talk about the future in a safe and meaningful way, but in a way that is not sitting back saying, well, we hope the world is going to come to us. We have to go out and make waves and bring the world to our way of thinking. And I think the opportunity exists dramatically for West Coast, Vancouver Island, and BC in general.
Thanks, Bill. Sharie, you're nodding. Do you want to follow up in any way?
No, I just, really agree, Bill. And, I think that there's so many examples of strong collaborations that have been formed in our business community, even with those new businesses that are just starting off, building off of each other's success. And it's amazing to see. When I hear, collaboration and partnerships, for me, what comes to mind right away is, in terms of, what this community has done well, is is housing. And, you know, we talked earlier when we were starting in this roundtable about the 40, I think it was actually 47% increase in real estate values this year, which was the largest on Vancouver Island, and I think second largest in BC. And that's amazing if you're a homeowner, you know, really fantastic if you're a homeowner, but for the people in our community who aren't, you know, they're getting a bit left behind. So I think where we've seen a lot of success in partnerships in this community has been in building new housing and affordable rentals. We've seen partnerships formed nation to nation, where maybe we hadn't before. House It First Nation is doing just an amazing project with the really intentionally, you know, with the blessing of local nations to house people here. The city is a partner on that. I think we've got about 10 different affordable and supportive housing buildings being built in this community to make sure that as we do continue to grow and we see success in our business market, in our real estate market, in a development market that we can't even believe we're seeing, and you know, the amount of development that's coming to the community, we're not leaving behind the people who have built a life here, and we're making sure that we build, you know, affordability and long-term for them.
Well, I'm really glad you said that. I think that's a really, really important point, and something that resonates in all communities now, and something of, you know, a big, you know, hats off to you, because you're in an important position, like many people, to try and get that balance right. So, you know, it's great to hear that there is, you've seen and people know that that's something that needs to be developed as things speed ahead or move ahead in the pace they're going. Reana or Gordon?
I would like to just kind of touch on a conversation that I've had with Pat, and I know in the past we had it with Sharie in regards to, you know, the new developments, any new developments that we hope that we can maybe look at, because I've a percentage of new developments for commercial and or certain areas that we could look at it as for landscaping, beautification, as well as art, public art, because, you know, as I mentioned in Europe, but I also receive from Vancouver, you know, Richmond. I'm always receiving emails for call out for public art because a new development is being done, and we're kind of in the position. Oh, I'm sorry. We're in the position to, you know, maybe look at that as a possibility for, you know, businesses coming in or developers coming in, that, you know, they see that that's a real plus for the community.
Yeah.
Great. Sharie, sure. And I'm sorry, I keep saying Sharie, but it's Sharie, and I apologize.
It's Sharie, and I don't even hear when people get it wrong because it's so frequent, but that's okay. Yeah, Gordon, I think that's a fantastic point. And I think that we are at such a unique point in time in Port Alberni right now, where we have the opportunity really to, again, like intentionally create the community that we want to create, to hold ourselves to a higher standard, to not just say yes to every development that, you know, wants to come into the community, but to create a set of standards that, you know, we may not have had 5 or 10 years ago because we didn't feel like we were in a position to turn down development. Now we are, you know, not that we want to be a community that's difficult to work with either, but we want to build a community that is what we want to see. And with the amount of interest we have in our community, with the amount of development applications across all sectors, I mean, we were double our 5-year average of development applications and dollar value of developments last year, and we are on pace to go well beyond that this year. It's our opportunity now to set those standards, to make sure that it's not just any development coming into town, but the type of development that we want to see, that shares our values for the community we want to create.
Well, everyone was watching. The world is watching. That's great. I thought I'd circle back to one question that we kind of discussed before we started about the blue economy. And then I've had a few questions come in from a couple of participants, so I can read those out to the panelists as well. So if anyone else who's attending wants to add their questions to the Q&A, I'll go through those in a couple minutes. I noticed someone has their hand up. If you could translate that into or write that question into the Q&A, I'd really appreciate it. So yeah, we were just speaking before about I mean, Bill's had some incredible speaking engagements this year globally, talking about the role and the potential scale of the blue economy, what that impact is going to look like. Certainly, you know, I've had some interesting conversations since this article, reminding me about the significance and the sheer size of the port in Port Alberni. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to the opportunities and challenges of that blue economy, which is getting a lot of interest and press, certainly globally, as we said.
Yeah, I think with respect to the blue economy, it is a topic, but it's a new topic. I mean, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, people weren't talking about the economic opportunities of the blue economy. We see it the last couple of rounds of federal government mandate letters include the blue economy. It means different things to different people. But if you think about it in some basic things, the earth is covered with 70% water, yet only 2% of food comes from the water. So we have an opportunity to feed the 10 billion people that will be walking around our planet in the next decade. And it's really key that we innovate in the areas of food, for example, food from the ocean, do it effectively and do it correctly. That's going to be very, very important. We set up Cascadia to be the biggest and the best in North America. We claim we've achieved that goal. There's a bunch of different metrics that you can use to do that. But in terms of economic development at a community level, it's not just about the race to be the biggest. It's more about the race to be the best, where best can be defined by everything from poverty levels to education levels to prosperity as opposed to profitability. And Mike Williamson, if you're listening, that's a tribute to the arguments that we get into about profitability versus prosperity. We're aligned with the community values. And blue economy can be leveraged. Port Alberni is one of the deepest water ports in Canada. There's opportunities for food extraction. There's opportunities for good materials from this. And I talked earlier about innovation, and the city of Port Alberni is a big cheerleader with the SOMAS site in saying, okay, we have physical plant here that we can use as a catalyst to leverage the blue economy because it sits right on the water. Where it's going to end up is a good question. This is where we have to talk about innovation and creativity and what's right in terms of economic development for the community. But by and large, it does represent an opportunity where Vancouver Island can be a go-to place for investment in leveraging the blue economy in harmony with the planet.
Sharie, you're nodding. And would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, Bill, I heard you say, aligned with community values. And I think that is just a statement that is so important. And we're seeing that with companies coming to the community, specifically in the blue economy, but not only coming to the community, wanting to understand who the community is, who we want to be, and what our values are. And I think that's just so incredibly important to be starting from that point. When I think about the blue economy, I think about really, seeing the growth in this area in Port Alberni, what message that sends about our community who, for a lot of people, and I think the article did a great job of highlighting this, Port Alberni maybe isn't who you think we used to be, right? Our community is transitioning, is moving forward. And you might have thought of us as, a polluting community. And now we are a community seeing success in the blue economy. We're seeing companies like Cascadia, like coastal restoration, has some incredible goals in the community, and others who are coming and trying to clean up and give back to that sense. So it's really exciting, and we see that, I think, spanning even some of our more traditional industries where it used to be about resource extraction. Now it's about innovating. I mentioned the Sand Group already. They certainly share those values. We're also seeing just fantastic improvements in catalyst paper and the resources that they're using. And across all sectors, it seems to be those shared community values. And that's an exciting thing to be a part of.
Great. Reana or Gordon, do you want to add anything there?
Sure. Is that okay? Always awkward on Zoom. Who goes first?
Yeah, sorry, I should be more specific. That's fine.
Yeah, no problem. I think that we've, historically seen what happens when you don't plan with intention, or what we've seen what happens, if a community is like, let me think about tourism as an example. We've seen what happens when you don't plan for tourism, and instead have an approach of, well, anyone and everyone should come here. And that's not always how these things work. It isn't, in fact. Your community has its own identity, and it's going to be a good fit for a specific kind of person, whether you're a tourist or planning to move here. So I think, like what Sharie was saying before, we were in more of a position of just trying to attract. It was much more general, but now we can be specific and we can zero in on who it is that would be a good fit. And part of that is showing who we are so that those people can find out, can see for themselves whether they're the right fit. So for me, it's very hopeful that to see at a government level, all levels of government, that there's this much intention of getting it right this time, and taking really good advantage of this opportunity. When we've been in a have-not position for a while, we recognize when there's a good opportunity coming. So we're going to make use of that. We're ready.
Oh, great. Planning intentionally. That's a really great theme to come out of this conversation. Gordon, any additional thoughts?
I would just kind of share the few times I've spoke with our elected chief Hutworth, Ken Watts, who's on the cover of your guys' magazine. He and the council and a number of others have great goals and great from what my interactions with them, that there's been good energy in regards to wanting to move forward. Very just like you guys are saying, very purpose, a good purpose, a good goal in mind, with good relations and good partnerships. So yeah, it's having that focus of goals and still being open to new ideas that may be a good fit that not all of us are focused on and seeing. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm looking at the questions and I see, Bill, I think you've noted that you'll answer one of these questions live from Sylvian.
Yeah, for us, many things in our value chain, many things are new and new to North America. Folks in seaweed world have been growing seaweed for millennia. Folks in our coastal zone have been eating seaweed and using it for medicines and other ceremonial things for millennia as well. But when we talk about wanting to bring a new innovative food stuff into the marketplace in North America, North Americans generally aren't that open to new products. And people think of seaweed as something slimy and smelly and salty that sits on a beach. But if you had a bunch of carrots and you threw on the beach and left them for a week or two, they'd be smelly and slimy. Seaweed, when you eat it fresh off the line, is a beautiful, wonderful tasting, loaded with goodness. But how do you process it? It's not the same as a leafy green. So we have to have all hands on deck to look at the best ways to do it. It won't only be, hopefully it won't only be Cascadia that does this, but there will be innovations in the value chain, in food processing, that will come to the table and say, hey, I've tried it this way. I'd like to build this out. The more food as seaweed as food we can put in front of people, the better. So innovation and collaboration are the key words, and we invite everybody to the table when it comes to that.
Thanks. Thank you. I've got another question here regarding the blue economy. Are any of you aware of the Coastal Restoration Society is moving their operations to Port Alberni? I know, Sharie, you just mentioned that, so I'm not sure if you'll see that question. If so, you can comment on what they add to our valley by doing so. Sharie, would you be in a position to answer that one?
Sure. I don't know how much of Coastal Restoration's plans are firm yet, but I do know that they're, and I think I've seen a comment from Josh from Coastal in the chain here as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably not too private, but up at the top there. Yeah, coastal restoration is a really exciting opportunity in the community because they are, ocean cleanup and doing that in an innovative way. And I know that they're already looking at partnerships with similar companies, and I know that they're speaking with other levels of government. I know that they're, really engaged with local nations and how they become, valuable partners and true partners with nations. And I'm excited to see really where they go in the community. And Bill mentioned earlier the SOMAS lands and the city's opportunity to really intentionally support a specific sector of the economy through those lands. We have 43 acres of waterfront land available all of a sudden, where a lot of communities are looking for space for things. We have this massive opportunity to really recreate the type of economy and the type of community and the type of access to waterfront we have, it's a huge piece of rewriting our story as a community and deciding how we want to move forward. So I look forward to continuing to have conversations with many different industries and companies and the public on those lands.
Yeah, wonderful. Now the questions are flying in. So if you guys do dip in and see if there's anything that you pick up on. While you're speaking, Sharie, I'm just going to say Ron Paulson asked if you could touch on the potential for movements of goods and services with the port, but also new opportunities presented by our airport expansion.
Ron Paulson is a favorite member of our council, just to be clear, if you don't know Carla. So thank you for that, Ron. There's a lot. I mean, the airport is something we haven't really even touched on beyond just a brief comment on what Coulsons are doing out there. But this valley, and this community at all levels, and I think well before I was on council, has been really trying to make that intentional plan to build the infrastructure we need to build the economy we need. The SOMAS lands is a huge piece of that. So is the airport, so is the port. We know that there's some development being talked about for the port, and just huge opportunities all up and down the inlet. It'll be really interesting to see, what comes and where that all goes, but we're certainly building collaboratively the infrastructure that we need for success in this community.
Thanks. I also see a couple of questions from Joel Marriott about kind of belonging, themes around belonging and collaborating, and kind of where to go to start those, to become part of those groups and create some kind of I'm trying to pull together a couple comments and questions, Joel. Where to go, what doors, cold calls, where to go to talk to people, to work in different groups, different communities with different nations. Can anyone offer some advice there?
Sorry, I'm just rereading the questions from him to make sure I understand.
I think if I was to chime in, I would say, don't be afraid to talk to as many people as you think are necessary to get the kinds of answers that you need. Most companies will accept cold calls. Many companies have operators, some don't. Even sometimes filling out forms, the contact form from an industry may get you somewhere. But I'm pretty old school, and pretty much like Gordon there, I'll always answer a phone. And I think that's really an important thing, is don't be afraid. Courage is really important, and there are no stupid questions. That's what we would say as we garner support and partnerships.
Well, that's great advice from the chairman of Cascadia Seaweed. Pick up a phone, don't be afraid to call, and there's no stupid questions.
Yeah.
That's one thing we can all take away from today. That's great. And hopefully listeners and future listeners will really get the sense of the openness and the willingness to make connections within the community from the four of you today. I think that really comes through your own experiences and your approaches. Is there anything else that anyone noticed on questions that I missed or that we should address?
I was thinking about Joel's questions about being someone new into the community, because I get asked that a lot, like, well, what do people do? How do we find each other? What's going on in Port Alberni? And there's a really large volunteer community here. People use volunteering as a way of socializing as well. So I feel like as someone who might be newer in the community, it's a really good avenue to, obviously volunteering feels good and it's something that you're probably good, you're on Pixel and you're interested in to begin with, but you will meet a lot of people in the community that way. And when you give back, it shows, right? It shows you're giving of yourself. It's part of that you believe in these efforts in the community. And I found that goes a really long way. Like if someone invites you to something as well, say yes, you know, go attend and see how it turns out for you. Don't turn down an invitation if you get one, even something that might seem like a small thing to you. We are of a size of community where you never know who's going to be there, and we're very connected. So it's worth being a little bit more social, maybe if you're not of that type. Push yourself there.
I think that's great advice, especially as things are creeping towards opening up. You know, hopefully we'll all see more events or ways we can participate. Really interesting what you say about volunteering, because that need has stayed strong, and it's been a wonderful way to socialize over the last few years as well. We're a few minutes before the hour, and I really appreciate everyone's time, the panelists and our attendees, for sharing this hour over lunchtime with us. I'll just give any of you want to add any final remarks? We've covered a lot of really interesting ground, and I think this will be very valuable for a lot of people to come back to. Okay, well, great. I'll thank you all again and end the conversation, and wish everyone a wonderful, happy day. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate this very much.